We're actually doing a good job of being on schedule. And I'm pleased about that because when I get to the topic of the American Revolution, which we are approaching shortly, I really like to take my time and get into the detail of that subject. There are certain topics that we cover in this class, which could be a whole semester class. I mean, when I was a student as a history major, I took a class on the American Civil War and just that. What is a chapter topic for my class could easily be a whole class on its own because some of these subjects are big and I like to spend more time with them, and I'll do that with the American Revolution. So let me create in your mind somewhat of a summary of where we are. Um, the colonial period is well underway. We are at a point now where the main British colonies along the east coast of North America have been established. Um, the last of the southern colonies to be established was Georgia in 1732. So by the time we get to the 1740s, 1750s, the English have a pretty substantial footprint in North America. And when you consider that this is a pre-industrial world, I mean, this is a world where people depend on animal power, where there is no electricity, people depend on wind if you're going to sail on a ship. When you consider that, Jamestown was founded in 1607, and, by the time we get to the early to middle 18th century, the English are pretty well established in North America. That's a pretty rapid expansion. And that expansion will accelerate. And there are going to be some changes and there are going to be some conflicts. I try to teach what I call a reality-based education. There's the world that we want, and then there's the world that we have. And I try to teach students about the world that we have while still maintaining optimism about the world that we want. But I have weird thoughts when I prepare for my lectures. And as I was reviewing my materials for today, a thought entered my mind that I will share with you. Actually, it's a question. And you don't have to answer it right now, but I want you to think about it. And the question is, are human beings capable of living together in this world in a peaceful manner for prolonged periods of time? Is that even possible? In other words, if you had what you considered to be the perfect government and the best leadership in the world and the best, most fair, just economic system, if everything was exactly the way you wanted it to be or thought that it should be in terms of system of government, economic system, political leadership, would we stop having conflicts? Would we stop having wars? Would we treat each other better? Would we be better people? Would we resolve our conflicts peacefully? I don't have an answer to that question. What I will say is that we've been trying for a long time on this planet, and it would be nice if such were possible, but we consider ourselves in many ways to be much more advanced than our ancestors, and yet here we are in a world that remains filled with human conflict and suffering and all the rest. I've had students tell me that they'll say to me, Mr. Ennis, I like your class, but you tend to be a little bit too pessimistic. That is a fair comment. I wish I were more optimistic, but I look around at the things that have happened in history, and I look around at the things that are happening now, and I think to myself, do we ever learn? If war is so terrible, why do people keep doing it? So now here's a question for you. What is it about today's lecture? Because I'm going to cover events in the 1730s, 1740s, 1750s, going into 1760. What is it about today's lecture that caused me to have these thoughts regarding human conflict? In fact, I'll hit unmute. In fact, I don't think I need to prevent you from speaking. I think we're at a point now where I'm not as concerned about Zoom bombing as I was at the start. So what is it about today's topic that caused me to have these thoughts before I sat down at the computer? Anyone care to respond to that? What's going on in North America in these English colonies between, say, 1730 and 1760 that is causing me to have these thoughts or ask these questions? Anyone want to take a shot at it? Oh man, class participation is not working.
Well, I got one, Professor. I think along the lines of, I know that prior to the revolution, obviously there was precursors to everything, just kind of how everything is kind of doing it now. I know that
keep that word in your mind, precursor.
Okay.
Everything that is a major event in history has, prior to that, a preview of coming attractions. Mm-hmm. So continue your thought, please.
Well, I just know that I remember you spoke earlier about the different colonies that were squabbling amongst each other, and then certain colonies were attacking some of the natives, and they're approaching their lands and whatnot, and then it goes into.
Why would they do that?
Well, because they're greedy. I mean, man's inherently greedy. Yeah. I mean, today's just government. I worked for the government for 20 years. They're greedy and they're evil, and there's just not a lot of good things about it.
Aren't there nice people?
Yeah, but nice people aren't in power.
Oh, really? Okay.
Mm-hmm. That's just my opinion, y'all.
Can anyone add to what he said? Are there any specific things that happened in the 1730s, 40s, 50s, going into the 1760s to illustrate what I would nicely describe as ongoing human conflict? Now, you touched upon the issue of land. Anyone else care to throw their 2 cents in here?
7 Years' War.
What about it?
Oh, man, Lord. Well, I mean, that's basically kind of the main reason why the American Revolution happened. England was pretty much, it's a reason, but yeah, England was pretty much broke after the 7 Years' War, which led to them taxing the colonies, which then led to us fighting back.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of Game of Thrones, although I didn't care for the final season too much. But one of the reasons I liked Game of Thrones was how accurately it represented the ruthlessness of politics. You're my ally today, you're my enemy tomorrow. You're my enemy today, you might be my ally tomorrow. And what I liked about it was that it represented that in politics, relationships are based on self-interest and need. And as interests change, relationships change. I mean, aren't there people that you had relationships with in the past that now it just doesn't work for you? So everything that you've said is right, but there's more. And Devin says taxation without representation. But see, getting back to the Ethan's point, the reason the British were broke was that they borrowed a lot of money to try to win the French and Indian War, which basically meant that even when they won, they lost because, they won, congratulations, but they were broke. Or, well, not broke, but let's just say that their balance sheet needed some work. And what I want you to understand when you look at history is that multiple things can be happening at once. It's not like things have to happen one at a time. History multitasks. So you have a growing religious movement during this period known as the Great Awakening. You have the ongoing importation of slaves who ended up largely going to the South, working on the plantations in the South, growing tobacco and then later cotton. So you have a growing slavery issue developing. Americans are, well, I'm going to use the term Americans now, because people who are now born here, by the time you get to 1740, 1750, you're now at a point where you have people who, you know, their parents may be from Europe, but they're born in America, and they're going to begin to think of themselves in a new way. And these people, as the population increases, as immigration continues, these people want land. And the most accessible place for them to get it is to move out west. But there are Native Americans that live out west, and so conflict will be inevitable. And it's sort of like, you know, wash, repeat, wash again. It's a story that just gets repeated over and over and over. I mean, I think the United States is a great nation, despite our many faults and problems and issues we still struggle with today. But there are certain things that simply cannot be ignored. And, you know, we started out, I'll tell you a little joke. I mean, you know, we started out with Jamestown and we ended with El Cajon. So, but the question is, how did that happen? And how did we fill in all the space in between? I mean, it isn't like there weren't people living, you know, living on this land. And it's an issue that has to be addressed. And in the end, history, you know, I mean, it's, everybody wants things to be fair, and it isn't. Think about times when you were a child that you lost a game, and you'd be like, well, it's not fair. Well, didn't help you win, did it? So, you know, life on Earth is brutal because people pursue self-interest. And I'm not suggesting that, you know, I'm sure you're good people. I'm sure, you know, you hear me speaking, and, you know, you're a good person, but I mean, don't you pursue what's good for you if possible? I mean, you probably don't go out of your way to try to harm others, but I mean, don't you do what serves your needs and interests? The question is, in history, if people do that, how far would they be willing to go? And probably they would be willing to go, in some cases, farther than you would. But that's a big part of this. So you've got a couple things going on. Let me be a little more specific. We have the ongoing slavery issue, as slavery is spreading and growing in the South. Hold on a minute. We have people who are coming over as immigrants from Europe, and then of course who want land, so they're going to be pushing out west. You've got people who are here who have children, they're going to be pushing out west, and so you're going to have conflict with Native Americans. That's happening. There's going to be a growing religious movement called the Great Awakening, where people are going to be looking for spiritual guidance and salvation. And you're going to end up with this religious movement where you're going to have these traveling preachers who sort of wander the countryside and deliver sermons to people living in remote areas. That's going on. And you've got France now joining the game. They're playing Game of Thrones. And just like the British were not going to sit back and let the Spanish dominate the colonial era, the French won in. So they're going to establish New France, a colonial empire in North America that is just north to where the British have colonized. So you know conflict is coming. I mean, it's just you don't have to be a history teacher to you can see that coming a mile away. So you know there's going to be a conflict there between England and France. They're going to get it on and have a war. And then, of course, the next question is, well, who will be affected by this war? It will affect England and France, but it's also going to have an impact on the people in North America. American Indian tribes are going to have to make a decision. Do they take a side? And if they do, which side will best serve their interest? That is going to be an issue. American colonists are going to have to make a decision on how they're going to get involved in this and what their interests are going to be. And I think it's an ugly thing to say that people decide what side to take based on their self-interest. And it's not a pleasant thing to say, but I wonder, well, maybe it isn't pleasant, but it's true. American Indian tribes who sided with the British or who sided with the French didn't necessarily do that because they liked them. You know, when the United States formed an alliance with the Soviet Union in World War II, it wasn't because we loved communist Russia and thought that Stalin was a great guy. We formed an alliance because it was in our interest to do so, because we had a common enemy. So the concept hasn't really changed, is what I'm trying to say. People form alliances, they change alliances, they form relationships, they end relationships based on, well, does it work for me? And I think that is just as true today as it was back in the 18th century. So I think that history itself is more a representation of human nature than of anything else. People talk about economic systems and political systems, and let's try this and let's try that, and they talk about religion and all the rest. At the end of the day, I still believe that people are going to do what they're going to do, regardless of religion or political beliefs or background. People are going to do what makes them safe or happy or prosperous or comfortable. And if you disagree with that, guess what? That's okay. And I want to give you a polite reminder that it's okay to disagree with me on things like that. You don't have to agree with me to get a good grade in this class. You have to be accurate on your facts. That is important. Think for yourself. Don't let anybody, teachers, anybody tell you what to think. Most important thing to me. Raise your hand if you were born in the United States but have at least one or more parents who were not. Okay, second question. Raise your hand if you have a parent who was born in a country that you have never been to. I can try to see if anybody's raising their hand on that one. See, this is where being in class is much better. Raise your hand if you have a parent who speaks a language that you do not fluently speak. Okay. So let's do a little, as my son's teachers say to him, let's use our imagination. Imagine that you have a mother who is a native German speaker, or maybe she is a native Dutch speaker, or maybe English. And let's say you have a father who is English or maybe Scottish or Irish. And they met in North America and they got married and they had kids. And you are one of those children. And your mom speaks German, but you don't. And your mom comes from a German region called Bavaria. And you've never been there. Are you going to have the same kind of feeling or bond to the old country of your parents if you've never been there, you weren't born there, you didn't grow up there? It's just not going to be the same. I have a lot of students, for example, who, they have families who came over from Iraq. I have students where the parents came over from Iraq, but the kids were born here. They've never been there. Some of them speak native languages, some don't. Your emotional bond and your sense of identity is going to be connected to where you were born and where you grow up and the environment that you are surrounded by. So what that means is that by the time we get to the 1750s, we now have a generation of people who were born in North America. They think of themselves as Americans, and they simply are not going to have the same type of emotional bond or connection to the land of their ancestors that mom and dad are going to have. I mean, for those of you, for example, I have several students who are in my class who were not born in the United States. A part of your heart will always be in the old country, will always remain. If you spent your youth, your childhood in Iraq or in Peru or in Mexico or Vietnam or any other country, it's a part of you. And even if you choose for whatever reason to make your life here, no one is going to erase the old country from your heart. But if you have children or grandchildren who were not born there, they've never been there, they may or may not speak the language, it's simply not the same. My in-laws were born in the former Soviet Union. Their native language is Russian. They have an American grandson. And although they're trying to teach him some of the language, which is fine, he's not going to be, feel about it the way that they did, although they didn't feel so great about it or they wouldn't have left. So there's not much to feel great about living in the Soviet Union, but that's irrelevant to the point I'm trying to make. Do you understand the point I'm trying to make? Because I definitely talk too much, which is why I took this job in the first place. If you want to be a teacher, it's a great job for you if you talk too much. You get paid to do it. But do you get the point I'm making here? So by the time we get to the middle of the 18th century, there's a cultural shift. I mean, what are Americans anyway? I mean, do you think that everybody who defines himself or herself as an American, I mean, do we all have the same ethnic backgrounds, all the same religion? No. And it was diverse even then. I mean, you could be born in America and have an English father and a German mother, or a Dutch father and an Irish mother, or whatever. Now, obviously, I'm referring to people who their ancestors came here willingly. I'm not discussing slavery at the moment. But the point I'm making is that the identity is going to change. There's going to be the identity of people growing up and living in these English colonies is going to be very different by the middle of the 18th century than it was at the beginning. And you're going to have people who technically they're English colonies, but some of them aren't even really English. I mean, if your father is Dutch and your mother is German, how English are you exactly? You understand what I mean? A lot of religious diversity. You've got Quakers in Pennsylvania. You got Puritans in New England. You got Catholics in Maryland. Some people belong to the Dutch church. Other people belong to the Roman Catholic Church. So even then, I mean, right now, diversity is a very popular word, but the reality is that even then, there was a lot of it. If you were to go to Philadelphia, in 1760, it would not have been unusual for you to hear people speaking different languages or worshiping in different churches, is my point. It isn't like these English colonies were homogeneous. They were all the same. They were different. Even today, I mean, you travel from one region of the country to the other and it doesn't feel like the same place. I mean, I made this comment before, the vibe is different just from Southern California to Northern California. I mean, imagine spending your whole life growing up in the San Diego area and then taking a job in Memphis, Tennessee. You know, it's the United States, but the culture, the food, the accent, it's different. Imagine taking a job in Boston, where you know, you wouldn't even be able to understand every time they want to pack the car. You'd be like, "You want to what? What did you say? Pack a car?" You know. Anyway, I was with my family in Boston. I love Boston. It's one of my favorite cities. And we went to an old restaurant, and my friends call me Marty. And I had some friends join me for dinner at the Union Oyster House in Boston. And we were waiting at the bar, not the bar, the bar. And I put my name on the waiting list for a table, and we're at the bar. And all of a sudden on the loudspeaker, "Maddie, Patty is 7. And my wife looked at me. She's like, "Is that you they're talking about?" So I enjoy listening to different accents. The colonies are expanding. There's going to be trouble, particularly in and around the area of the Great Lakes. Native American tribes there, generally speaking, were much more cooperative with each other and more well organized. You had something called the Iroquois Confederacy, which was brilliant, really. You had these different Indian tribes that were independent, but that yet cooperated with each other for mutual defense and trade and self-interest. And it worked pretty well. And it also meant that they were going to be in a somewhat better position to try and resist colonial expansion into the Great Lakes region and the Ohio River Valley. So what that meant was that colonists and their descendants who tried to move into those regions faced pretty stiff resistance, frankly speaking. And by the time we get to the 1750s, for people living in what is now Western Pennsylvania, Western New York, this is a major concern of theirs. Benjamin Franklin, who I will have to say, like, if you said to me, "Mr. Ennis, you must pick one person who is your favorite person from History 108, who is it?" If you pushed me, I would have to say Benjamin Franklin. He so interests me. I mean, what an interesting man. And as I continue to lose my hair, I feel a kinship with him. But he was a brilliant man. I mean, just check this guy out, right? He was born into a large family. I mean, his father had, I don't know, 10, 12 children, or I mean, just a ridiculous amount of children. And he was, I think he was the youngest son. And he was forced to work. His father was a soap and candle maker. But young Ben was born with, shall we say, above average intelligence. And he was a fast learner. He went to work for his brother, who ran a print shop in Boston. He became an indentured servant to his older brother, James. And young Ben basically almost overnight practically became better at the job than his big brother. And let's just say it did not enhance their relationship. And so as a teenager, I don't know how old he was, maybe 15, 16, 17, he basically says, "I've had enough of this, the hell with this, I'm out of here." And he essentially runs away. And he gets on a boat and he goes to Philadelphia. So just imagine being like a 16 or 17-year-old kid with no money, no family, nothing, just a good brain and a skill. You're a printer. So at least he was able to find work, and he gets himself a job in a print shop, and he very quickly rises and becomes a leading printer in Philadelphia. And he was a brilliant businessman. A book you may want to read someday if you want to learn how to get rich. He wrote a book called The Way to Wealth. I also highly recommend his autobiography. I mean, this is a smart guy. In addition to becoming a brilliant businessman and printer and writer, he was also interested in science and doing experiments. I mean, this guy, he's a businessman, he's a printer, he's a writer, he's a community leader. He invented social networking before anybody knew what social networking was. He created a social networking club in Philadelphia called the Jump Toe, where all young businessmen would get together. They'd meet at a pub and, you know, have a couple of beers, you know, every week or two, and they would have a meeting and say, okay, you know, how's business and what can we do to help each other, and what can we do to make the community better? And I mean, he was so far ahead of his time. It's not even funny. And he says, well, you know, we do business in this town. Let's help each other. Let's make life better. Why don't we try paving the streets, and let's have let's have candles at night so people can see where they're going. And why don't we create a fire department? And why don't we have a lending library for people who can't afford to buy books? And I mean, he was so modern in a world that was not modern. And he was also, most people when they get older get more conservative, and they get more sort of stuck on, this is how I do things, I'm not going to change. He wasn't like that. He was always willing to change, even as an old man. With regard to his attitude toward slavery, I mean, in the beginning, he was typical of men of his period. He felt that men like himself were superior, but as he went along, his views changed. And he, by the end of his life, he's saying, you know, this whole slavery thing is not right, and people should be allowed to be educated and have an opportunity. And he really, you know, comes around on this. I like the idea. I can live with the imperfections of people a little bit more easily if they show a learning curve. And he had one. So by the end, toward the end of his life, his views changed greatly, and he was much, again, more and more modern in his thinking, because he believed in science, he believed in reason, and the idea that a person should be inferior or superior based on the color of their skin. He realized that's not logical. It doesn't make sense. So he was very forward thinking. He created the lightning rod, which is still used to protect buildings from lightning damage today. He created the Franklin stove so that when you needed to heat your home, most of the heat stayed in the home rather than go up the chimney. I mean, this guy, he created his own musical instrument, for God's sake. He was at a party and he saw this guy putting on a show where he was rubbing his wet finger around the rim of a glass to make a sound. And he said, gee, that's a kind of a cool idea. So he went to a glass maker and he said, I want you to blow glass in a long tube of different sizes and put a rod through it so I can spin it. And then he sat down with this thing and the glass would spin like this, and he would dip his fingers in the water, and then he would play this thing. I mean, he called it the glass harmonica. I mean, this guy was just incredible. His mind was always going. When he would travel back and forth to England, he would take water measurements of the water temperature, and he mapped out the Gulf Stream of the Atlantic. I mean, this is a high-powered dude, all right? And also, to be honest with you, forgive me for saying it, but he liked the party. He liked having a good time, and he considered one of the greatest accomplishments of his life the fact that he never caught a sexually transmitted disease. Because in his youth, let's just say he enjoyed the company of the ladies. In fact, his son, William, was the result of a fling that he had with some woman somewhere. And she gave birth to the baby and basically said, well, here, you want your son? If you want him, here he is, you can have him. And when Franklin got married to his wife, she was really cool. I like his wife a lot. She was like, this is not my son, but I will be his mother, and I'm going to raise him as my own. And what a remarkable woman and he didn't do right by her. You know, the fact that he was married, I don't know if he actually cheated on her, you know, really cheated on her when he was married, but he certainly continued to flirt with women. There was a young woman that he became friends with. He met on a carriage ride when he was traveling, and they became pen pals, and they would write each other these, I suppose you could call them naughty letters. And he was old enough to be her father, and they were very flirtatious with each other. I mean, he loved to flirt. And then, of course, later when he became America's representative in France, trying to get the French to help us out during the revolution, I mean, there wasn't a party he didn't go to, and he'd be up late at night, and he'd be drinking and eating and flirting and just having a ball. And poor John Adams gets over there, and he's like, this guy's a dirty old man. What the heck is he doing? And Franklin tried to explain to him, and John Adams just couldn't get it. And Franklin tried to explain to him. He says, John, this is Paris, not Boston. And you want us to get help from these people. We have to be friendly with these people, and we have to be social with these people in a way that they understand. And this is the way they do things. And poor John Adams just could not comprehend it at all. But Franklin becomes a rising star in Philadelphia. The last anecdote that I'll tell you is I was in Boston with my wife, and Boston's one of my favorite American cities. Every one of you should visit there if you haven't. And I was walking through the streets, and in Boston, they have a lot of people who dress up as impersonators of historical figures, and they give tours, and they go to schools and so on. So I'm walking along the street, and this Benjamin Franklin impersonator comes the other way. And this is the inspiration for the assignment that I gave you for Black History Month. So this guy is walking the other way, and I'm with my wife, and I go up to him like, Dr. Franklin, what an unexpected honor to meet you, sir. And the guy stayed in character, and he goes, and how do you do, young man? And who is this charming lady at your side? I said, may I please present my wife? And my wife was looking at me like I was absolutely out of my mind. And this guy and I engaged in a 30-minute conversation. And I spoke to him as if I were speaking to the real Benjamin Franklin, and he went along with it perfectly. And it was one of the great moments of that trip. And my wife was just looking at me like my husband is out of his mind. But it was great. And anyway, I like Benjamin Franklin. Read his book, The Autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. And don't do it for me telling you for your grade. Do it for yourself. How about that idea? Read a book for yourself, because you'll learn something that is worth knowing. Read the autobiography of Benjamin Franklin. Read his book, The Way to Wealth. Read Frederick Douglass's autobiography. I mean, I don't think a person should be allowed to graduate from an American high school without reading that book. So Benjamin Franklin sees what's going on with the problems out in Western Pennsylvania, with conflict between the Indians and the colonists. So Franklin has this idea. Franklin is a visionary man. And I want to say something about him that most people don't realize. Up until the moment of the American Revolution, he was extremely loyal to England. He lived in England for years as Pennsylvania's representative, representing American interests and American affairs in England. He was America's guy in England, representing not only Pennsylvania, but representing the colonies in England. And he loved England. I mean, he really did. Most people don't know that about him. And, but he was also a visionary. And he saw early on what the American colonies could be if they worked together and they cooperated. So now I'm going to say something that's not going to make any sense, but it does make sense. My 9-year-old son last night before he went to bed was playing a game called Fortnite, which is a combat game. And he plays online with his friends. So they do this thing called trios, where it's 3 kids and they're going to be in a battle against other teams. So he's landing in the combat zone, and all 3 of the boys ended up going into a completely different area. So I said to my son, I says, you have to stick together so that you can help each other. You can attack together, you help each other, you work together as a team. I says, what's the point of working as a group if you're all going to be in different areas? You're all going to get picked off one at a time, which is exactly what happened. Now, what does that have to do with what I'm talking about? Franklin believed that if the colonies could ever get beyond their petty differences and their petty competitions with each other, if they could ever figure out some way to work together in pursuit of common objectives, that the potential for them was limitless, which in the end is one of the reasons why the Americans won the American Revolution. I mean, there are many reasons why the Americans won the revolution, but having 13 colonies on going in one direction, there's no way that the American Revolution would have been successful if half of the colonies had stayed loyal to England. Think about it. You have 13 colonies at the time of the Revolution. What if 5 of them decided not to join? Wouldn't have worked. Think about it. His history shows that your chance for success is always greater when you work together. You don't always have to like each other. You don't always have to agree with each other. But if you're working on an objective, it's like playing basketball or baseball or football or soccer. You don't have to like all the people on your team. But if you know how to work together as a unit, you have a better chance of winning. And that's true in anything in life, whether it's war, politics. It really is a truth. In my view, I really believe that. So Franklin thinks, let's take these English colonies and let's get them on the same page. Let's create, he called it the Albany Plan of Union. Okay, so it's 1754. And he recognizes that there is a major problem going on in the Great Lakes region and the Ohio River Valley, where you've got Indian tribes attacking colonists on the frontier. Now the French are moving in. There's danger on the horizon. So Franklin wants to get the colonies to respond together. This plan goes nowhere. And at the end of the day, it gets back to self-interest. So imagine this. Imagine, for example, Katerina, you live in Western Pennsylvania, and you and your family are threatened by hostile American Indians who don't want you there. Now, all of a sudden, you're starting to see, French soldiers showing up from time to time. You don't feel very safe, and you feel threatened. And by God, you'd like to see the colonies do something about it to protect you and back you up. All right. Meanwhile, Joaquin, you live in Georgia, hundreds of miles away. None of this affects you at all. You feel sorry for other people who have problems, but this isn't your problem. So the question is, how involved are you willing to get? Are you willing to have your community send troops to participate in a military action? Are you willing to pay taxes to fund it? In other words, this isn't your problem. So are you willing to get involved in it? Pay for it? Send your son off to fight in it? Or is your attitude going to be, I'm sorry about your problem, but leave me out of it? You understand what I'm saying? That's the reason why Franklin's plan was dead on arrival. Because you were not going to get buy-in. I mean, people who lived in Pennsylvania and New York, they're pretty worried about this. Massachusetts too. But people living in, Georgia or South Carolina, this isn't their fight. And they just didn't want to get involved. The reason why that is not the case during the American Revolution is that in the case of the American Revolution, the policies of the British government became everybody's problem. It wasn't just policies that affected only some colonies and spared others. So now there's a common threat which causes these colonies, which are very different, to come together against a common enemy. But in 1754, we're not there yet. Does that make sense to you? You will understand history a lot more easily if you constantly ask yourself this question. When you look at what people or groups of people do, or you look at what they did, ask yourself the question, well, what would have been their motivation to do something or not do something? Would it have been, sometimes it's in your interest to act, and sometimes it's in your interest not to act. Haven't you ever had a friend or a relative who seemed to get themselves in trouble and you felt bad for them, but you didn't want to get sucked into this? You know what I mean? That's exactly what I'm talking about here. You don't have to be a history professor to understand it. So basically, these colonies that had to deal with the threat of the French and the Indians, they're not going to get universal support. And this Albany plan that Benjamin Franklin wanted to come up with, in the end, it was a good idea, but the time hadn't arrived yet. Lots of European immigrants, some came from England, some came from Scotland, some came from Ireland, some spoke German, some spoke Dutch. Now, I'm speaking about white European immigration. I'm not talking about slavery at this moment. But even when talking about white European immigration, we're not talking about people who are the same. As I said, there are different languages spoken, different practices of religion. We, in terms of arguing about immigration, do you actually think there has ever been a time in American history where we didn't argue about immigration? Because if there is, I haven't found it. Even before independence, Benjamin Franklin in Philadelphia expressed his concern about whether or not all these German immigrants who were moving out into Western Pennsylvania, whether or not this was a good idea or not. And, their culture was different and their language was different. And Benjamin Franklin, as intelligent as he was, questioned this. He's like, maybe this is not a good thing, that these people are, their background is different, their culture is different. So people have been arguing about immigration even before America was an independent nation. And yet, of course, it didn't stop people from coming over here. But I'm just saying is that the arguments are always there. What changes are the names of the groups. Devin, is my lecture boring? I saw a yawn. Boring, isn't it? Would you like a song? Okay, well, I'm not going to sing a song. Speaking about a birth rate, I can only speak for myself. My wife and I have one child. We love the kid. He's a good boy. We're very busy just with one kid. I mean, in the morning, we get up in the morning and, I get him ready for school and make him his breakfast, and he gets dressed and, take him to school. And then later on, we help him with his homework, and then he has activities and he's got piano practice and all the rest. It's busy. And kids are expensive. Kids, once he was out of diapers, I felt like I got a pay raise. But back then, women had, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 children. It was not unusual. There are a couple things that you have to consider about people having children then compared to today that are very different. Number one, infant mortality rates were much higher. Women who had children, if you had 6 children and 3 of them survived to adulthood, you counted your blessings. And imagine how awful it must have been for a woman. First of all, every time a woman got pregnant, her life is at risk. Women died in childbirth all the time. I mean, what do you think? They had modern medicine? You think they had antibiotics? I mean, a woman being pregnant is risking her life every time she's pregnant. I mean, when my wife was pregnant with our son, well, part of the problem when my wife was pregnant is that they tried to do the ultrasound on me. And I said, no. I mean, it looks like I am, but I'm not. But I went with her to every doctor's appointment. And I was worried. I mean, I started reading like all the things that could go wrong. It, scared the heck out of me. And I was just so nervous. And then when our son was born, he spent a week in it's called the NICU. It's the, intensive care unit for newborns, because he had trouble breathing. And they ended up giving him antibiotics and he got better and everything was fine. But if our son had been born in 1750, he probably would have died. My grandmother, may she rest in peace, gave birth to twin baby girls in the 1930s, and they both died. And she was back to work on the farm like later that week. And I remember I asked her one time, I said, how could you do that? She said, I had children. She said, what choice did I have? We had to eat. And so it's almost like these people didn't have the luxury of grief, or they had to, if they experienced grief, they had to experience it while they were working. Which is why in many ways, I think that our ancestors were tougher than we are, not necessarily because they were better people, but because what choice did they have? What choice did they have? What do you think? Women giving birth were going to be given, family leave so that they wouldn't have to work for a few months while they tended to their newborn. I mean, the woman gave birth, and as soon as she could walk, she's back in the kitchen. I mean, it's incredible. My wife, after she gave birth to our son, she was out of work, on medical leave for a couple of months. I mean, what do you think? They had that back then? So women had a lot of children, but to have children that survived to adulthood would have been rare. To have all of them survive. I have a student saying no epidurals. I was with my wife when she was giving birth to our son, and the greatest thing I think that she ever discovered was the epidural. She went from like, I'm in agony to like, okay, I'm going to take a nap now. So it looks so great. I almost wanted one for myself. Another thing you have to understand about women having children is that if you lived in a remote area on the frontier, your children were not just your children, they were your workers. I mean, imagine living out in the middle of nowhere on a farm. And I mean, do you have any idea the things that you need to be able to do on your own? Think about it. You need to be able to know how to make a fire, how to use a weapon, how to tie knots, how to cook, how to hunt, how to raise animals, how to slaughter and butcher animals, how to do pickling and jarring. Maybe you have a smokehouse for your meats. You have to know how to do carpentry. The amount of skill that you need is extraordinary. So having, a set of hands to help. I mean, if you have a family farm, mom may be making a fire to cook a hot meal, and one of the kids is milking the cow, and another kid is churning the butter, and another kid is tending to the animals or collecting the eggs, or maybe helping another family member repair a hole in the roof or chop firewood. I mean, this is, when people talk about the good old days, try it out for a week and see if you like it. There's a show, you should look it up online. It's called Frontier House, where they take these families and they're going to live like it's the 1800s out in the wilderness, and they're all so excited, and the kids are excited. It's going to be so much fun until they realize there's no toilet paper, there's no shampoo, there's no refrigerator, and within a few days the excitement was gone. You know what I mean? And so anyway. So women had a lot of children, but it was not unusual to have children who did not survive to adulthood. And one of the reasons why there was a high birth rate was that you wanted to have children who could help you and work on the farm. So that's a big part of this. But then these children they're going to consider themselves Americans. And then if you have a bunch of children who are going to want land of their own, well, where are they going to get it? They're going to be moving out further into the frontier and wanting land of their own, and then they're going to have conflict with American Indians. By the time we get to the American Revolution, half of the population of the colonies is under 16 years old. It's a young population. They're going to have as much interest in England as I am with a gym. So. I want to show you a little video clip, and I've got so much stuff I want to talk about here, but I want to show you this. So I'm going to do a little screen sharing. Hope it works. Let's try this out. No, that's the wrong one. Let's try this one out. There we go. This isn't bad.
William Penn's long-standing good relations with Native Americans was crumbling quickly.
Penn and the Quakers made and honored treaties to share land with Native American tribes like the Lenape and the Conestoga. But by the middle of the 1700s, other European immigrants are settling further west, deep into Native territory. They expect to be given the land, but the natives refuse.
Groups of angry men with guns visit Indian townships and threaten them.
In the aftermath of the French and Indian War, we see Penn's promise of Philadelphia as a place of refuge shattered.
The Paxton Boys were not boys at all. They were Scots-Irish farmers.
Paxton is just an anglicization of a Scotch-Irish name for a district out near Lancaster.
This is the territory that is still under the control of Native Americans. And you have French and British troops that are amassing around as well. This is a whole place in conflict.
During the French and Indian War, several Native American tribes ally with the French and attack Scots-Irish colonists settling in Pennsylvania's hinterland.
People are killed, and the stories are so terrifying.
Natives burn the houses down, they mutilate and burn the bodies of the dead, they scalp their victims.
The Paxton Boys blame the Quaker-dominated pacifist government in Philadelphia for ignoring the consequences of a growing frontier and their own demands for protection.
You have Scots-Irish believing that the Quakers are deliberately refusing to protect them because the Quakers have it in for the Scots-Irish. Quakers believe that the Scotch-Irish were a bunch of provocative thugs who are deliberately creating controversy and stirring up trouble with the Indians.
The Quaker government wants to resolve frontier conflicts with peaceful negotiation. The Paxton Boys want results.
The Scots-Irish finally decided to take matters into their own hands and launch their own attacks on the Indians without the permission or support of the Pennsylvania Assembly.
The Paxton Boys in 1763 savagely murdered a group of Christian Conestoga Indians living peacefully along the frontier.
Was it simply self-protection? Or was it the Scots-Irish coveting the lands occupied by the tribes?
This is clearly theatrical violence. It's no less horrifying for that, but it's impersonal, it's meant to make a point, and it's meant to affect politics.
To Philadelphians, the Paxton Boys' motives are unclear.
The assembly feels humiliated and embarrassed that they can't extend law and order into the countryside in a way that will matter.
Now the government sees the Paxton Boys as criminals and sympathizes with the massacred Conestogas. Benjamin Franklin is particularly horrified.
He writes an editorial playing on the emotions of people.
He talks about families being broken, mothers pleading for the lives of their children. He imagines the site of the killings in kind of hallucinatory detail in a way that's meant to move readers in the city.
After the publishing and popularity of Franklin's pamphlet, the Paxton Boys realize that the government still does not take their grievances seriously. They decide to come to Philadelphia and confront the government face to face.
The Paxton Boys stages their own march from Lancaster to Philadelphia.
One of the impulses behind marching on Philadelphia is the desire to answer back and to represent themselves, to say what they're like, to say what their grievances are.
But the city fears the Paxton Boys will bring their violence with them.
These natives have left the countryside as a result of threatening visits from angry armed men. People in Philadelphia think that they're coming there in order to kill all of the natives who are sheltering in the northern part of the city.
The government is bringing aid and military protection to the Indians. When the news came that the Paxton Boys were marching on Philadelphia, the city was in an uproar and literally overnight organized a militia.
This militia is going to go to Germantown and it's going to confront the Paxton Boys.
The once peaceful city must face change. As the city grows, so do its conflicts. But Benjamin Franklin insists upon negotiation over bloodshed. He meets the Paxton Boys at Germantown and, using reason and rhetoric, prevents a violent confrontation.
When Benjamin Franklin met the Paxton Boys on the outskirts of Philadelphia, the threat of the Paxton Boys marching into Philadelphia and burning the city is averted.
Franklin mediates between the Assembly and the Paxton Boys.
What the Paxtons get is a promise that their demands will be put before the Assembly.
Two of the Paxton Boys are allowed to stay behind in Philadelphia and put together a pamphlet that will be printed and that will explain what they've been doing and why.
In fact, many of the Paxton demands for expanded representation are addressed. Not fully, but changes begin to be made.
The constituents that the government is supposed to represent have shown up with angry voices to demand things. People see the power of popular mobilization and they start to imagine politics in a new, much less quiet way.
That story is useful on so many levels. First of all, if you've been reading your book and paying attention, I hope you noticed a similarity between that incident and Bacon's Rebellion. It's almost like Bacon's Rebellion 2.0. You have colonists out on the frontier who want Indian land, who are complaining that their local government is not doing enough to protect their interests. So they take matters into their own hands and they're not all that particular about the people they kill, whether they deserve, any type of protection or not. They take matters into their own hands and then they threaten the government themselves. Remember, Jamestown itself was largely destroyed at Bacon's Rebellion, and the same thing could have happened to Philadelphia. So, there's a pattern here of Americans willing to engage in rebellion, number one, to pursue their self-interest, and number two, if they feel that the government isn't listening to them. I suppose if you really wanted to be creative, you could ask yourself, are there any themes from this story that resonate with our modern day political divisions? I think you wouldn't have a very hard time finding that. And I think what it really says is in the end that people are people and people do what they do. And people will look out for what they want and protect their interests violently. And if they feel the government isn't listening to them, they're willing to react in ways that can be counterproductive sometimes. So, you know, there's a lot to digest here with these stories. There's so much to talk about. And I'm glad that we're, you know, at a place in the class where we can do that. Scheduling is good where we need to be, so I can take my time a little bit with this stuff. So this is a good point for me to stop, and I'm going to wrap up this chapter. And I think you can tell that I enjoy teaching this material. It's not that I like all the events that happen, but it's interesting to me. And whenever I teach this stuff, I'm always trying to compare what happened back in the day with what's going on now. And I want you to start thinking that way. It'll make it. Don't you ever wonder, like, why do colleges make you take these classes? Like, haven't you ever asked yourself, like, I wasn't alive back then. Why do I have to know this stuff? And the answer is to help you understand cause and effect, and also help you understand, you know, that human actions in history often is based on repeating narratives that maybe, you know, we're not as different from these people as we like to think we are. That's my personal view. So before I wrap everything up completely, does anyone have any questions? Go ahead. You have to unmute yourself.
Oh, sorry. My question is for later, but it's okay.
You can ask.
Well, it was for, well, because it was for one of the assignments that we did, and I was wondering, like, what, because you could tell me after class, because what I did wrong, because I got like an 8 out of 10, and I was wondering what else I needed for my assignment.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Yeah, basically 8 out of 10 is a B, which is good.
I know, but just in case.
I'll just make a general comment that normally if a student gets an 8 out of 10 instead of a 9 or a 10 out of 10, it's because I probably wanted a little more detail. I'll give you an example. I had a student who got an 8 out of 10 on the assignment, and he said, well, I thought I did a good job. And I said, you did. And he wrote in his answer about the age of exploration was because Europeans wanted trade with, they wanted goods from Asia. So I said, well, okay, what did they want? Like, can you tell me, like, what did they want that motivated them to want to go there? And he didn't give me examples. So normally it's just, you know, usually a question of giving a little bit more detail or more specifics, that's all.
Okay, perfect.
Which makes, when you think about it, it makes sense. I mean, ask yourself, if you're a teacher, an A is excellent. How do you define an excellent answer? An excellent answer tells you what you need to know, but gives you the detail and the specifics to back it up. That's the difference between a good answer and an excellent one, which makes sense.
Oh, I did have another question.
Well, you're only allowed one today. Sorry. No, just kidding.
Okay, so in my work that I turned in, I got all my information from the book, and I put the page numbers, but I forgot to put on my works cited like from the book. So I don't know if like
Oh my God. Now it's, look, let me just say, there's a reason why that assignment was only worth 10 points. I want you to get your feet wet. You're going to get better. The fact that you caught that mistake hopefully means you won't do it again.
Yeah.
Here's the bottom line. By the time you get to the midterm, you need to know how to cite your stuff correctly, which is why I posted those videos and I posted that information.
Yeah, I got everything done, and I'm like, okay, I finished it. And then as soon as I press turn in, I'm like, crap, I forgot.
Look, not a big deal at this point, but it will be when the midterm comes. But you're gonna be fine, so don't get all worked up over it, because you're okay.
And for the assignment, this weekend, do we just have to make like two or three questions, or?
Well, I would say that I'd rather err on the side of having more rather than less. I was a little bit
Yeah.
upset on the earlier assignment. I mean, I didn't put a word count, but I should have had a minimum.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see at least, 150 words as a minimum, and I may send out an email reminder to that effect.
Okay, because I was wondering about that, because I know some teachers just want a few questions, and then others just want more, and
Well, I mean, you're pretending that you're going to sit down and meet some very important people from history. I'd like to think that you'd have a lot to say.
okay.
Anyone else with a question or a comment of any kind? Do I have
Professor,
any
I do
tips
have a
for taking
question.
notes for this class? I do. Consider that if I mention something by name, that's a good indication that you're going to have a test question on it. So if I talk about the Paxton Boys, I just showed you a video clip, or I talk about like Bacon's Rebellion, or I talk about Benjamin Franklin and the Albany Union of 1754, or I talk about the French and Indian War. You want a study guide? There it is. I mean, if I mention it by name or date, there's a pretty good indication that I'm going to be asking you about it later, that if I mention it by name or date, that means I consider it important. I also recommend the use of note cards rather than a notebook. Buy yourself a package of index cards and make yourself a little packet for each chapter where you write the name of something on one side and the definition and the year on the other, and use that to study. And I have discovered that that works very well, particularly if you're not familiar with the material already. I think that's very effective. I also recommend that you take a pencil and read your book. And after you read a paragraph, you take your pencil and you write little notes in the margin. What did I just read? I just read a chapter about a rebellion out in Western Pennsylvania. Okay, what are the main concepts here? And then make little notes for yourself in the margin of the book. And I also recommend that you take your pencil, and if there's any word that you don't know, circle it and look it up so that you do know. And then if that doesn't work, ask me. You do those things and you're going to do very well. There's only one problem with all this, and it's a very serious problem. These things take time, which means you have to put in the time. And there's another problem. These things are not always fun. So if, this is just work, there's a reason work is a 4-letter word, So, but these things do work. I mean, you put in the time. It's like a football player, going to football practice in the middle of the summer. It's probably not a lot of fun, but it helps you win games. So the same things that'll make you a good athlete make you a good student, which is very true.
Excuse me, Professor?
What's that?
I had a question.
Go ahead.
Is the quiz going to be mostly on this module, or is it going to be like
Everything
anything
we've talked about? Everything we've talked about so far is on there.
Okay, and should we still be recording this?
What do you mean? Still be recording what?
You're still recording the.
Yeah, because you have a midterm coming up and you're going to have another quiz. And so anything not covered on the first quiz is going to be on the second quiz or the midterm. Like all this material, whether it's what I covered today, even if it's not on the first quiz, it's coming later. So you still need to know it.
No, I understand that, but you're still recording as of right now this exact.
Oh, I see. Yeah, because I want people, if they watch this, then they may have similar questions.
Okay, I was just double checking,
that's
make
fine.
sure you knew.
Yes. Do I want the Black History assignment question and answer? You can if you want. I don't have a problem with that. I'm not gonna be too rigid on that. Any other questions? Okay, before I let you go, I'm gonna stop the recording